What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Leland Bjerg. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm excited. So you were on when I brought the entire creative team on of the book Thistle, and you because you were the letter on that boat. Now we're back, and this is your baby this time. Like, it's full blown. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, man.
Thanks for hopping back on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I always like to talk to my creators to just, have you always been interested in comic books? You know, or did you grow up reading comic books, or did you kind of come later into it in your life?
I had a big gap. I was very into comics as a kid. Felt a strong attraction to them. You know, it's a storytelling form that clicks for me. So yeah, I was reading everything I could get my hands on. I'm from a very small town, so all I had access to was our little convenience store in the late 80s and early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
One anecdote that I've been sharing is like when Maximum Carnage came out, which was, a big Spider-Man event, and it was across every issue, right? So it's an Amazing the story's being told in Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, well, we only got one of the 5 Spider-Man comics. So it was this, I mean, it was cool though, because it was this quest for me and all my friends. Whenever our parents took us to a major city or something like that, it was like, okay, you're responsible for finding this issue. And so we assembled, we Voltroned together all 13 issues for that story between all of us and got to read it. So yeah, comics were a big part of my childhood. Calvin and Hobbes was a big part of my childhood, as it was for everyone my age. And then I reached an age where, I dealt with the stigma towards, right? Oh, that's kid stuff. That's that's not sophisticated. And I listened for a long time, right? It wasn't until 6 or 7 years ago that another comic came across my path. I think it was actually Jim Zub's Skull Kickers was one of the things that pulled me back in, because he was doing it as a web comic. He was hyping himself up as hard as he could, and at that point in time, and found Skull Kickers, and that, I love Army of Darkness. I love fantasy comedy blends, and that sucked me right back in, and I started rediscovering this medium.
Yeah.
And how much I love it. And yeah, pretty soon I was like, okay, I'm going to start making them.
Yeah, I don't think your story is too different than a lot of us of reading them at an early age, then for whatever reason kind of have this gap period, and then later on in your life you're like finding those things that you love so much. Like, I mean, I had that too, and so what then when you got back in the comic books and like you're like, okay, you said Skull Digger, and now you're like, but now I want to do it. What made you, like, where did the background or this idea of like, I want to create comic books come from for you?
I think that's part of just my nature. I'm pretty curious. For me, when I get interested in anything, at some point I'm going to end up trying to do it in some form or another. So was really passionate about music for years. Loved hip hop, so I needed to learn how to make beats. So I went through a whole period of making music. And
that, first off, I'm gonna just pause you right there because that sounds fantastic. I love, as someone who loves hip hop, I'm like, ooh, okay, how have we not talked about this yet so far, Leland? Like, you've been holding out on me.
Yeah, well, that one's definitely I had the problem, I think, that a lot of creative people have, is of like picking something.
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, I'm serious about comics. All the other creative endeavors are hobbies, or they're gone, because this is the thing that I'm focused on. Yeah, and when I was a teenager, I was really into mountain biking, which meant we're making bike videos. And like we it's like turned this fun thing we did into like, okay, we are a production studio. Everybody's got a backpack with a camera, tripods. yeah, we're a production company, and yeah, just nerds be nerding, right? Like,
right, yeah.
I've got something I'm passionate about, I'm going to master every aspect of it.
That needs to be on a t-shirt. Nerds be nerding.
Yeah.
I'd buy it and I'd wear it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So if you don't copyright that soon, I'm stealing it. I'm just telling
No,
you.
that's thanks for the interview. Consider it a gift.
So you were kind of like, okay, you got back in the comics. You're like, this is something that I'm passionate about. Now it needs to be, this is where my focus is. Did you have a background? Because I know when I brought you on, you were talking because you were lettering the book. You also kind of were writing aspects. Is there a background in writing and creating stories, or did this kind of just like develop because of your love for comics?
Yeah. I've always written. Was really into poetry as a teenager, and then that pivoted directly into song lyrics and storytelling. I had an issue. I never knew. I think like a lot of people have. I never knew where to begin. Which, I mean, I think my own particular hangups, not having a map meant not going on the journey, which is a mistake. When I started learning about story structure, that for me was the key. Like, oh, there actually is a map for storytelling. There actually are things that most stories have, right? A protagonist with a need, and they have to go somewhere uncomfortable or enter an uncomfortable situation. And it's like, once you start seeing that stuff and seeing that it's in every almost every story that you love, I was like, oh, cool. Okay, there's a way to do this. I don't have to just dream stuff up. I mean, you do have to dream stuff up, but there's a way to put your ideas together that makes sense.
Yeah.
To both you and other people. And that was like, I don't know, that for me, that was like being handed the keys.
Yeah. So where did it then? So the idea come about? You're like, hey, I want to get into this. I want to do this. How did that transition though go from making this, I want to get into writing comics, to then the reality of where we're at now, talking about your Kickstarter, which I haven't even said, Kickstarter Capsule, which is going on right now. We're going to talk about that book here in just a second. But how did you get from, all right, I want to pursue this career now of writing comics, to now where you're at with this book?
Well, I realized that I dealt with a lot of fear, I guess, with creation, and that, like the thing I was talking about, like discovering story structure, and like, and realizing like sometimes you just gotta get lost in the woods. You gotta break some eggs. You gotta make some mistakes. And so I was like, okay, I'm serious about this thing. I'm going to make a comic. And I had a script that I liked, and so I teamed up with an artist and committed to making a comic a week. So started with a web comic, right? Okay. A page a week, not a comic a week, a page a week.
Listen, hey, you commit to something, you commit, Leland.
Yeah. But yeah, page a week. And at that point I was just like, I'm learning. It's okay if this isn't good. I specifically picked an idea that I'd come up with off the cuff, which is about like, it was like sort of a Victorian Ghostbusters meets Harry Potter thing. And I actually really liked it. I learned a ton. And I took on writing, lettering, and coloring.
Okay.
And ultimately I've learned I'm not a colorist. But getting my hands dirty was great. I understand coloring. I made all the mistakes with printing too, right? Sent like every, like the basic mistakes, right? Sent it to the printer in RGB instead of CMYK. So all the colors were messed up in my first print run. All the levels of the colors, there's a big difference between colors on a monitor and colors on the page. Everything we could have done wrong there was done wrong. And at the end of it, I didn't die. In fact, I learned a whole bunch, and I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's get bloody. Like, let's fall down. Let's scrape our knee. Let's learn some stuff.
And that probably helped you in the process of making a comic book, right? Of the more you can understand the process, you can understand the ins and outs of what your colorists go through, what your inker goes through, you know, you lettering, all that. Like, I think what that does is it helps you captivate into, okay, these are areas that I understand now as you're writing or as you're crafting the story of. I think that just the more we can learn, no matter what it is, the better we're going to be at our craft, right?
Man. Yeah. No,
even if it's not a main focal point of your craft.
You know, but I think particularly if you're the writer is often the quarterback of a project. So you have to have the better your understanding of every aspect of comic production, the better you're going to help everybody else's workflow, the better you're going to appreciate how much time they're spending doing what they do. You know, when you get to sit down and dream up 10 pages in a day, and they're going to spend 2 weeks bringing those to life, like you better have a feel for how much work it is.
Right. Now we're at the point of you're creating comics, you're creating this book. So tell the people, we waited long enough. What is this comic about, Capsules? Because I want to hear the elevator pitch. I'm excited to hear you share it.
Oh man, the elevator pitch. I mean, yeah,
it can be a long elevator ride.
Yeah. No,
if we need to be a long elevator ride, we didn't say we're not going first floor to second floor. We can go to the penthouse if we need to. Take your time on
it. Yeah, this one definitely was brewing for a while as I was pursuing comics. My wife and I were going through some heavy stuff. She worked in an emergency room, and she saw a lot of crazy stuff. She dealt with a lot of trauma, and she developed PTSD. And so we went through this, you know, she went through, first and foremost, she went through really crazy experiences that, you know, caused her to develop a really serious condition. And then I had to go through, you know, the secondary heavy experience of learning to, you know, support and care for somebody who's got a mental illness. And this, you know, that was all very heavy. The storyteller in me was thinking about and processing this, you know, this sort of tragedy of differing perceptions. And I think that's where you know, when I think of comics, I don't think tragedy. You know, I feel like where it's, you know, comics are escape, they're fun. But these conflicts that come from, I'm following my instincts and you're following your instincts, and nobody means anybody any harm, but we're being driven in opposite directions, or even worse, we're being, you know, we're crashing into each other because you know, what one person needs and what the other person needs is they, you know, they're in conflict. And also those moments where that were funny, you know, like where you're pushed to your wit's end. And you know, there were times where, you know, I'm trying to you're kind of pushed to your wit's end. We're dealing with insurance companies denying claims. I'm working full time out of town a lot of time, which was just a mistake because I should have been here, but I was doing remote work at the time. I was working up north building camps. And you know, I'd be so pushed to the brink, and the thing that would make me snap would be something dumb. Right. It would be, you know, I can't find I remember one time I couldn't find a BandAid. I'd been playing with our dog. Her dog was a puppy. She had these, you know, tiny little razor sharp puppy teeth. She lunged at the toy, missed, and ripped my thumb open. And I come into the house and I can't find a BandAid, and I melt down about a BandAid. And as much as you know, when you're at like that, push that far, there was the storyteller in me was like, this is funny. There's something here. There's something here. Like this guy who's me right now, but hopefully one day he won't be. And I'm probably, in that moment, I don't know how much I saw it, but at some point I saw it of like this guy who's going through a hard time, but has this awareness that he's needed, right? That he's needed, and who he's with whatever he's going through, what she's going through is that much worse.
Mm.
And it's I don't know. To be at that emotional extreme for a long period, I have moments that I'm most proud of in my life, and I have moments I'm most ashamed of.
Yeah.
Right. I there are these times where I rose to the challenge, and I felt like a hero. And there were moments where I was exhausted and weak, and I'm throwing a fit about a tantrum. And if you're with someone with PTSD, one of the things they have is hyperacusis, which is their ears become super sensitive.
Mm.
So somebody losing their mind and yelling about BandAids is triggering. It's not good.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, sorry man, I'm getting into the weeds on the heavy stuff. I was
I appreciate it, because I mean, holy buckets, it gives such sheds a light on this comic, as you were so graciously able to share a review copy with me, and the process of dealing. And you said something that was really interesting, the differencing of perspective. I was like, wow, like, because that is something that is really highlighted, I think, very well in this book, that almost no one's needs are more important than the others, but they're different needs. And how do you balance that? Like, it was, and so now to get the kind of in the weeds aspect of it, I think that's why we do interviews. This is what people want to know. They want to know.
Okay, cool.
You're fine.
I'm like, don't be a downer. Don't like.
No, you're fine.
Because I'm trying to, I want I do want to deliver these, because you get these absurd moments when you're
Right.
when you're in those kinds of situations. So yeah, I tried to find the humor, and the love and the devotion, because ultimately that's, when you have these two characters on an escape pod, stuck together, but they're what's holding them together is love. These two people genuinely love each other, and are willing to fight for each other. And I hope, I'm glad you like it, because I was like, when I wrote this one, I was like, I think this might be the best thing I've ever written. let's see what people think.
And I mean, you have, I think you have such an important story, and obviously you're taking, it sounds like a more of a life situation and putting this in this kind of outer space realm. But I mean, this seems like this is a story that I feel like a lot more people than we would expect can relate to it, right? Like, and dealing with all those aspects. And originally I was going to ask, like, how did this idea of dealing with something so heavy of emotional trauma, and how to deal with a mental disorder like that, how to factor into your writing? And so, like, oh, you write what you know, right? That's what people say to do. And it just, again, the how you tell the story aspect of both perspectives, I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think it can speak to a lot of people, that even if you're not going through this situation, whatever, I think people can read it and go, I can feel it though. And I can feel the tension and the struggle in there. And I think that's where it's hard to do sometimes, right? Like when you're writing a story, to make it relatable if someone hasn't gone through what is being told to go through.
Well, and that's a place where comics really fit this story, right? Being able to show Anna's perspective visually, right? Show intrusive thoughts, and hopefully approximate that for Because yeah, that was definitely a thread in writing this, was like, I like stories to be useful.
Yeah.
Right. I think all, all the good ones are, right. Like just Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, right. Those those kinds of those themes and meanings. And yeah, so I wanted this story to be useful. I hoped, like, if this helps somebody else who's got someone in their life that's struggling with an issue, and you're having trouble understanding them, here's here's an angle on that.
Right. Yeah.
Here's a story about that, about one person failing to understand another person who needs their help.
Yeah. And yeah, and it is powerful. And so I highly recommend checking it out. So I want to talk to you about how did the creative team for this book come about? Like, was this kind of you going around pitching, or is this someone that you worked with before?
Yeah. My collaborator on this one's Casey Posnikoff, and Casey and I have done one other short story together, a book about how fox terriers, or just terriers, are evil, called Mothers and Daughters, which is actually, all I do is just mind my life for stories, because this is based on my dogs. I got a couple of fox terriers, and terriers are funny because they're cute little dogs, but they're bred to kill rodents. They're little killing machines. They're like Krombopolis Michael from Rick and Morty. They just love killing. So yeah, take them out and play with them, and they're so sweet. And then they go into kill mode, and if they get to an animal, they're gonna take it out. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting into, so back to Casey, the person I'm
again, I don't care, I love it, man. Go for it.
Yeah, right. Right on. Yeah, I will tangent everywhere.
Into my life.
Casey's from my neck of the woods.
Okay.
They're from the Kootenays. A tattoo artist, very close friends with my younger brother. And so yeah, when I wrote Mothers and Daughters, Casey's got this great sort of dark, natural feel, interested in the same kind of themes I am. Hit them up, and yeah. And actually, I was going to VanCaf, which is local indie, or relatively local. It's in Vancouver convention.
Okay.
And I think I was like 2 or 3 weeks before VanCaf, hit Casey up with this idea. Hey, could you draw this in time for me to get it to the printers? And Casey hammered it out, and it turned out beautifully. And I was like, I'm working with you again.
Yeah.
And yeah, so when Capsules came along, I was excited because I knew the sci-fi part was a little out of their wheelhouse, but then there are these biological elements to the story, and I knew Casey was very passionate about mental health, and I was like, I think this is a fit. And so yeah, I hit Casey up, and we were a go, and we drew the dang thing.
Yeah, it's a great team up for sure. So let me, as I don't want to take up too much of your time. With a Kickstarter, I know there's always usually there are tiers and stuff that people can support. Is there something special about Kickstarter that you're like, I'm excited about Kickstarter for whatever reason that we're bringing this project there?
I mean, I'm definitely excited about Kickstarter just for the basic, because I pitched this story. Unfortunately, we didn't find a home. And so it's so great when the gatekeepers say no, that you get to be like, well, what about, you can now shout over the wall, right, to the audience and go, hey, what about you guys? What do you think? and we're still early in the process while this is recording, but it's been really amazing. People are shouting back, and there's some excitement. So yeah, I wanted to keep it really simple. This is my first Kickstarter.
Right.
So it's just like, if I get the book in people's hands, great. We've got some cool extra items. Our biggest tier is me editing your work, and I'm a freelance editor. So if people need an editor, hit me up, or back my Kickstarter
that
and
tier, baby.
get my editing. The bonus thing that I added in, and I wish I thought of it right after I launched, but everybody's getting a copy of Mothers and Daughters, the Fox Terrier story for free. So all the physical backers are getting a little bonus book.
That's awesome.
Right off the bat. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so cool to see, like you said, of keeping it simple as a first tier. But I love the illustration of, like, listen, if the gatekeepers say, nah, this isn't working, like, okay, cool, we just bypass you, right? Like, it's like it almost is like the illustration, like, kids like, oh, mom says no, cool, we'll go to dad.
Yeah, that's right.
I love it. So, well, as we're wrapping up here, is there anything else that you're working on, or that you worked on past that you want to plug, or other things, irons in the fire you got going, or is it your main focus right now is Capsules?
I'm the sort of person that I like to have. I have like a wall of Post-its, which are things I have on the go. There's a lot of Post-its over there. I always have a bunch of stuff on the go. That's just the way I work. I have a novella that I'm wrapping up that is a cool sci-fi adventure that I'm doing in collaboration with a band, Living Machines. They do these really epic story worlds. They have a whole extended universe that their music set in. I've done some work with them before for their head guy, Quinn McGraw, and now I've been brought into their universe, and I'm helping them with this project. So we're wrapping up the first draft on that. That's probably coming out in like 6 months. And let's just hype that one. The main focus is Capsules.
That's fine.
The main focus is Capsules right now.
Yeah.
I'm in Capsules world. And yeah, if people like it, there's more Capsules stories. But I'm trying to not get ahead of myself. I want to deliver people a good, complete story with this first issue, and I think we succeeded.
I think you did too.
Awesome.
As you know me, I don't usually bring people on unless I like their work. And Leland, from your stuff, I already checked out, and then getting to preview this, I think people will. People are going to feel it, and I think people are going to appreciate this book, and I think it's a well done. And so I highly recommend those that are watching, those that are listening to the podcast, go back this Kickstarter. By the time this video is dropping, we're going to be at the tail end of this Kickstarter, and that's just as important as the beginning, because it needs back, no matter how far along it is, to always go support it, because the more the merrier. Well,
thanks a bunch, man.
Leland, thank you so much for just taking some time to talk about Capsules with me, taking some time to talk about your comic. I greatly appreciate you just spending some time with us tonight, just talking about comic books with me. So,
man, thank you, Greg. I gotta, I don't know how many people do this, but one of the things that motivated me when I was first making comics is fantasizing about doing interviews. So you're making one of my early comics dreams come true.
Awesome. Well, good. I'm glad that makes me happy. Well, where can people follow along with what you're doing? With all the stuff that you have created. Where's the best place for them to check out what you're working on?
Best spot to hit me up right now. I'm between websites, so check out at Bjerg Leland on Twitter, and I'll be yammering about everything I got going on there. Awesome. And I used to write blog posts about story structure. I want to get those back up again, but that's website launch on that sometime after Capsules comes out at this point.
But if you're following along via Twitter, you'll know when the website
Yeah.
drops and launches. So link to Twitter is going to be in here in the description of this video or in the description of the podcast, as well as a link to the Kickstarter. So now that you've done listen to this Kickstarter and interview, go check it out, go back it. With that being said, Leland, thank you so much for taking the time to talk comics, and hopefully y'all can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.